Hey friends, it is Jenna, what is up, and welcome back to the Board Game Garden, and welcome to a preview of this game right here. This is FLOE. It is designed by Henry Audubon, Yoma, as well as Johnny Pack, and it's published by Pika Games, who's helping sponsor today's video, so a huge thank you to them. And I will say right off the bat, this has been a game that I have been anticipating for, I think, probably over a year now. I first talked about this in, like, the games that I'm excited about. I think it might have been in like early 2023, so it's probably been about a year. We can skip to that right now to see young little Jenna. So this has definitely been a game that I have been very excited about for a very long time, and I am honored to be showcasing it for you guys here today on the Board Game Garden. So yeah, we're going to get right into this. This is a pretty big game. There is a lot going on. It is not like the most heavy game. Don't think that this is something that is going to be super heavy. It definitely has a lot going on, but it is achievable for those of you that are just getting into the hobby or have been in the hobby for a bit and are wanting a game that has a lot of strategy and different paths to go down and different things like that. So yeah, because this is a bigger game, we're going to get right into all the components, the aim of the game, how to play, an overview of how to play. I'm not going to go into every little thing because there's a lot going on, but we are going to give you guys a good little overview of the game. So yeah, without further ado, if you guys want to see me talk about FLOE, then just keep on watching it. Give this video a big thumbs up. Also hit the subscribe button down below if you've yet to do so. We'd love to have you here in the garden. I will also have the link to the crowdfunding campaign for FLOE down in the description box. You guys can go and check that out if you're interested. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into this preview of FLOE, shall we? All right, so the aim of the game in FLOE is that you are all adventurers and you are trying to embark on the most adventure and you're trying to discover the most and just be the best explorer. So that is what you're trying to do. When it comes to the gameplay, you are trying to be the first person to get to 6 victory points. Whoever is the first to get to 6 victory points will trigger the end of the game, and then there's going to be some like end game scoring with some of these different secret kind of goals that you're going for throughout the game. That is these little cards right here with the little scroll on them. Those are some secret goals, and you're going to be gaining those throughout the game. And then once someone, like I said, hits 6 victory points, everyone will then, I believe, get another turn, and then you're going to go into endgame scoring, where everyone's going to count up the victory points that they got for those secret goals, and then whoever has the most victory points at the end is going to be the winner. So that is the aim of the game. You're going to be going into this village and doing different actions. You're going to be going into this like exploration map of the Iceberg Sea. You're going to be going from iceberg to iceberg, going on different boats, and you're also going to be discovering new regions. And then at the bottom, unfortunately, because this board is so big, you're not going to be able to see the bottom, but the bottom is the caves. So you're going to be delving down into these caves, fighting these monsters. I will say it's not something that you have to do in the game, so if it's not something that you like, fighting monsters and that sort of thing, you can decide not to do that and just go more for exploring and doing more in the village and stuff like that. So yes, like I said, there's a ton of different paths to go, and there's not one certain way to win in the game. You're just trying to collect victory points in different ways. So yes, that is the aim of the game. Basically, you're just trying to be the person that is the best explorer and getting the most victory points. So that is that. Let's get into kind of a little bit of an overview of all of the components. So, like I said, this board is very large in the center. So you have the top board here that is the village as well as the scoreboard. Then there are some cards here. There are some landscape cards as well as encounter cards. Those are going to be coming into play in this middle area here, which is compiled of 6 different squares. 2 of them are going to be starting face up in the center, and that is where everyone is going to start. You're going to start on this kind of middle center bay here, and then you're going to be using your heat in order to explore. So heat in this game is a very important thing because obviously you're exploring in this cold, frigid, you know, iceberg sea. So you are needing heat and you are getting cold. So you are losing heat as you explore more. So you are trying to do as much as possible with the heat that you have, but then once you have run out of heat, you are wanting to come back to the village recuperate, rest, build up that heat again, and then go back out exploring. So the exploring is out here, and like I said, the landmarks are going to come into play with the exploring as well as the encounters. You're going to have encounters in different ways. There's sea encounters, iceberg encounters, and cave encounters. So that is that there. And then at the bottom, you guys will be seeing B-roll as I'm talking about this, but there is a cave board at the bottom, and there are 5 different monsters down in the caves, and you're going to be going deeper and deeper into the cave as the monsters get more difficult and more difficult to defeat, and that's a good way for you to gain goals as well as some victory points as well. And in this game, which I will also say right off the bat now, this is a prototype. It is still being developed. All of the components here are prototype components. Definitely check out the campaign if you want to kind of see the progress that they're making and just the small changes and different things that they're adding with the campaign as well. So yes, you have that down there, the cave board, and you're going to be, like I said, delving deeper into the caves in order to gain different things down there as well. There's also diving, which is on the cave board as well, which I will explain. But that is the main board there. Each player is going to have a player board, which are on this side and this side. Again, I don't think you can see the entire boards, but each player is going to have a player board. Like I said, I will have some B-roll of this, but the player board is compiled of your hero. Each player is going to have a different hero that are these little minis here, and you can change the color of the bases. Those just pop on. And then you also do have a familiar, so you can kind of mix and match the hero that you'd like to be and the familiar that you'd like to be. Each player also does choose some hero cards, and this is kind of a little bit of an upgrade mechanic in the game where you have 2 different options depending on the miniature or character that you choose, and these are going to kind of push you in some different directions when it comes to strategy in the game, because each of them are going to give you some sort of ongoing ability or thing that you kind of have for the games. So this one you can either choose to be the Tavern Tipper or the Explorer, and these actually are 2 cards, and you're going to be leveling up your character level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4, and it kind of gets progressively stronger as you upgrade. So you have your character, you have your familiar, like I mentioned, and your familiar is going to allow you on your turn to kind of do a secondary action for, did you guys hear my throat there? A secondary action your familiar can do on your turn that depends on what you decide to do. So it's going to be able to do some sort of action while you're in the village, some sort of action when you are exploring the Iceberg Sea, and some sort of action when you are delving into the caves. So you have your familiar, you have all of your resources in the center, and these are going to be capped off with these FLOE tokens that you're going to progressively be putting up the track until eventually they get all the way up to the top of the track and you can take them off and place them onto shrines for victory points. I will get into how the resources work because I think that's a really cool part of the game. You also have your heat track, which, like I mentioned, you are going to be dealing with your heat, and it's a very important part of the game, and you can kind of make your heat track go further and further by taking off these cubes. You can also switch up and down the half victory points. This is something that they have in the game as of right now, where you can gain half a victory point, and then once you gain another half victory point, that gets you up 1 more victory point here. So there's kind of like half actions, I guess, or like things that aren't as strong as getting you a full victory point, but if you do 2 of those like slightly less stronger actions, they can both get you half victory points that then add up to a full victory point. So you have that. You also have, if you gain a chest and a key, you can get a treasure card, and that's going to give you some different benefits. I'll get into all of the different things, but basically the village is going to have some associated, there's 5 different locations at the village. So each of the 5 different locations at the village are going to have some associated items. And like I said, you do have the special quest cards, and then you also have the treasure cards. There are potions that are going to help you when fighting monsters. There's also crates that get you some different resources and different things. And then you also have these stands over here for the different landmarks that come out. You guys can see here that there is one landmark out. Yes, I believe that is everything for all of the components. Like I mentioned, I will be putting in some B-roll here of all of the different components. There's also bags of these different resource chips that are going to be coming out as you discover the regions. But yeah, that is everything for that section of the video. Let's get on to how exactly FLOE is played. All right, so getting into an overview of how FLOE is played. Like I mentioned, I'm not going to get into all of the small and nitty-gritty things, but we'll go over all of the different things that are going to be happening and the different actions that you're going to be taking on your turn. So like I mentioned, this game is played over rounds. You're just going to start with a starting player, and then players are going to take turns until one player has reached that 6th victory point. And then once that has happened, each player is going to flip over all of their secret goals or their quests, and they are going to count up the victory points that they get for those. And then whatever player has the most victory points at the end of the game is going to be the winner. So that is the general flow of the game. But let's get into exactly what you're going to be doing on your turn. So there are two things that you're going to be able to do on your turn. You're either going to be going into the village and taking one of the 5 village space actions. Technically 6 if you're counting one other action, but you're either doing that or you're going to the Iceberg Sea and you are exploring. So starting off with the village actions. So like I mentioned, the one thing that you can do on your turn is you can decide to go to the village, and you're going to be placing your miniature or your hero onto one of the 6 spaces. So there are 5 different buildings you can go to. Then there's also this building over here that is simply just like a rest. If you are really needing heat, which like I said is a very important thing, you can go to this over here. I will put all of the titles of the different buildings as I'm talking about them, but if you go to this location here, which I believe is the healer, you are going to either get 4 heat, so you're gonna put up your heat track 4 spaces, or you can get 2 heat and gain 1 potion, which, like I said, potions are going to be giving you one-use things that you can use while you are fighting the monsters in the caves. So you can go there, or you can choose one of the 5 other locations, which these locations are going to be the spots that you're going to have to use your resources. And I will mention that the way that you're going to be gaining these resources is by going out and exploring. So we're going to talk about all these village locations, keeping in mind that the way that you're getting all these resources is doing the other action, which is going and exploring. So getting into the 5 different locations here, we're going to start over here. This is the shop. So if you go to the shop, which I will add, another part of going to the village is the villagers. So you're gonna have these villager miniatures, which these are not, a specific player's miniatures. These are just here in order for you to gain heat again. So if there was 2 villagers on the shop and I, as the hero, decided to go to the shop, if there are 2 villagers there, I will gain 2 heat. So you're going to gain a heat per villager that is at the location that you're going to. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to take the 2 villagers and move 1 to the next spot and then 1 to the spot after that. So you're going to kind of progressively move them over. If there was 3, 1 would go here, 1 would go here, and then 1 would go to the next spot. And at a village location, there's only a maximum of 3 villagers at a location. So if ever you would have to move a villager to a spot that already had 3 villagers, you would just move it to the next spot in like a clockwise order. So let's get on to what each of these locations do. So like I mentioned, the shop, you're going to be spending your pearls. So each of these village locations is going to have a resource that is connected to it. So the shop has the pearls, and basically what's going to happen in this game is that whatever resources you have, so you have to max out your resources. And like I mentioned on the player boards, you're going to have these FLOE tokens. And the FLOE tokens are only going to be at a certain location on that resource track. So whenever you go to a location, that resource that you're going to be using has to be at the maximum that it can. So it has to be right up to that FLOE token in order for you to take this action. And then you are spending all of the resources that you have. So when you take an action right at the start, your FLOE token is going to be at the lowest spot. So you're only going to need 1 of a specific resource. But then that village location actually includes in the action that you put that FLOE marker up. So whatever resource you used on that location, the flow marker would go up, and then the next time that you have to go to that same location, you have to have one more resource than you had before. So you are going to be, as you are going to this location, you're going to be moving this flow marker up and making that location more and more expensive the more and more that you go back to it. And eventually, you will have that flow marker get all the way up to the top, and then that's when you can build a shrine, which we'll get into, and that's a good way, or one of the bigger ways to get victory points in the game, which is getting those flow markers all the way up to the top of the resource tracks. So that is what this little arrow up with the resource means, is that you will be bumping up that flow marker. But for the action that you're going to be performing at the shop, this is going to be that you can purchase a item. When I go here, I'd be able to choose from one of the 3 items that are available in the shop, which these items, like I mentioned, are going to help you with diving into the caves and beating the monsters. So these are always going to be, you know, something to do with fighting monsters. So this one here is the trusty axe. Every item is going to have a blue side, and then they're also going to have a brown or like orangey yellow side. The blue side is where it starts, and this is going to allow you, each sword you use deals 3 damage. So typically a sword would deal 2 damage when fighting a monster, which we'll get into, but this one would allow your swords to be worth more. And then you also have these merits in the top left-hand corner, and whenever you gain a certain amount of merits, this one you need 2 of the brown merits whenever you have those available. And basically merits are going to be on your personal board, as well as the buildings that you're going to be compiling, and they're just going to be there on your board available once you have gotten them, or moved your flow markers up enough to have them in your possession. But once you do have a certain amount of those merits of a certain color, you're going to be able to upgrade your item, and then they are going to again get you some more benefits for when fighting. So that is the items there. The next action is going to be the kelp shop, or the noodle shop. And this is going to be the location where you're going to be able to gain one of these kelp noodle cards. And this is going to first allow you to move one of your cubes from your heat track. So there's going to be some cubes kind of blocking the top of your heat track. So as you get rid of these cubes, the higher your heat can go and the more heat you can gain. So when you get one of these cards, you're going to first be able to take one of the cubes off of your heat track and place it into this other reserve. And you can use those cubes then to place onto the landmark cards, which we'll get into. But once you have moved that heat cube from your heat track, you get to choose one of the 2 benefits from this card. So there's going to be, you know, some resources, some heat, you can gain a key, a chest, different items, maybe some potions, whatnot. You would gain them from these cards. So that is the kelp noodle shop, or the noodle shop there. We also have here the hot springs, which I'm just trying to kind of move the villagers as I go. But next is the hot springs, and these are going to be connected to these cards here, which these are like the locals, kind of the people that are hanging out at the hot springs. They are going to be able to kind of talk to, and then I think they like kind of send you on a quest where you're going to be able to, every player gets this feather, and you're going to be placing the feather onto the starting part of this card. So each card is going to have 3 different things that you want to achieve in order to kind of move your feather to the right until you have completed this quest, and you can discard the card. So once you do place your feather onto the first spot, that actually allows you to pick up one of the secret quests. So this is going to be something that you're going to keep to yourself. And like I mentioned, these are going to then be scored at the end of the game. If you manage to get a lot of what is on these secret gold cards, you're going to gain victory points, and that is going to possibly allow you to win the game. So these secret gold cards are very, very important, and these little local cards from the hot springs is how you're going to gain those. So once you place your feather on the first spot, you gain that secret card. Then you have some different things that the card wants you to complete, and whenever you complete that certain thing, so this one here for the first spot is that it wants you to go to one of the campfires. So if you do go to a campfire, which is on the exploration area of the board, you gain a dive action, so you'd be able to do that. Then you would, if you went to the kelp restaurant or noodle shop, you would then be able to move to the next one. That would allow you to do a cave action. And then lastly, if you had either a iceberg encounter or a sea encounter, you'd be able to move that up. And then that reward is half a victory point, and then you'd be able to discard. So you have some different things that you're going for, and that is the local cards there. And I don't think I mentioned, but for the hot springs, that is connected to the green like mushroom resource. And then the noodle shop is the kelp reddy pink resource. And then lastly, we have the last of the 4 main resource locations, and that is the works. So this is going to be the shop that allows you to purchase buildings. So these buildings are off to my left right here, and there's going to be 3 different buildings that you can choose from in order to gain. And this location is connected to the wood resource. So you would go here, you'd pay every single wood resource that you have. You'd move up your wood resource flow marker, and then you would be able to gain one of these buildings. So these buildings are actually connected to your familiar, which we'll get into after this. But these buildings are going to be a little bit of a tableau to the right side of your player board. And the more buildings you have, the more spaces your familiar can go to. So there's going to be a bottom part of your building and a top part of your building. And basically, when you go to the village, you're going to have your familiar that is going to be able to do a secondary action once you've completed your action in the village. So once I was finished with my action here, I would gain a building. I would be able to place my little familiar onto either the top part of the building or the bottom part of the building. And then going from left to right, I would be able to trigger all of the bottom of my buildings or all of the tops of my buildings, depending on where I put my familiars. So these are going to be able to allow you to get some different benefits, spend your bubbles in order to do some different things, which I will touch on the bubbles, which the bubbles are in the center of the resource tracks. And the bubbles actually represent a wild resource where it's ratio of 2 to 1. So I could spend 2 bubbles in order to represent any other resource when I'm paying for them in order to do one of these village locations. But yeah, that's everything for the works location. We are then going to move on to the 5th and final location here. This building here is going to allow you to use your gems, which you are primarily going to be gaining gems in the caves, but you can also gain gems in different ways through different cards and stuff and different benefits. But when you go to this location here, you can spend your gems in one of 3 different ways. So the first one is you can spend 1 gem in order to upgrade your character. So when it comes to upgrading your character, you can either upgrade your character cards, so your hero cards. Like I said, you have 1 to 4 levels here, so you can decide to use that level up to level up your character or your hero card, or you can decide to level up on your hero board, which you can decide to level up your dice. So that's going to allow you to use more dice when going into the caves and defeating the monsters. So everyone starts with 2 of the monster dice or the battle dice, but as you upgrade, you do get all the way up to 5 dice when you are battling the monsters. So that's what you're going to be doing when you're upgrading your character. You can then perform the action, which is you can spend as many gems as you would need to perform one of the village actions. So for example, if I needed 2 wood in order to do my next the works action, I could spend 2 gems instead in order to perform the works action and not have to spend any of my wood resources. So I could go here, I would then be able to move up my flow stone like I would normally, or my flow marker like I would normally, perform that village action like I would normally, while standing here on this location. And then lastly, you can spend 3 gems in order to gain a half a victory point here at this location. So it's a great way if you're gaining lots of gems from going into the cave and fighting the monsters, then you can go here and spend them in a few different ways. All right, so moving into exactly how we get all of these resources in order to perform all of these village actions, and that is exploring. You're always going to be placing your hero character onto the central location on this board here, and then basically what you're going to be doing is you're going to be spending heat in order to move to these different icebergs, or you can decide to take one of the boats to a location. You're still going to have to spend heat, but but this allows you to move through the dark spaces of the water, where when you are moving your hero character, you're only going to be able to be moving through the shallow waters, so the lighter blue spaces on the board. So wherever you want to go, like I said, you have to spend heat. So however many shallow water spaces you pass through, so for example, if I wanted to move from this iceberg over to this iceberg, I would be passing through one shallow space, so I would have to spend one heat in order to do that. If I wanted to then go to this iceberg here, I would have to spend another heat. But however many spaces you move, you would have to spend one heat. So the farther you go, the more heat you're gonna have to use. And then you can perform one of the exploration actions. So that is going to include picking up some sort of resource. So there's going to be resources on the iceberg. There's going to be resources in the sea. There's also going to be resources in the shallow areas, but those are going to be only for the familiars, which I'll get into. But you can decide to pick up a resource from whatever iceberg you're on, or if there is a boat connected to that iceberg. So if this boat was here on this pier space, the boats always have to be connected to these little docks here. But if I was on an iceberg and there was a boat at the dock, that would allow me to go and dive into the ocean and grab something from the darker spaces. So in this situation, I could either grab this little crate here that is on the iceberg, or this boat is going to allow me to grab this one right here, which is the dive action, which I will quickly get into the dive action. It's very simple. If you decide to take this little marker here, it would allow you to dive into the sea and grab something from the dive track. So basically what happens is whatever is at the, highest spot on the dive track, you're going to be able to take that for free. But you can decide to spend heat, more and more heat, to go lower and lower. There's always going to be 5 different things. There's going to be 2 bubbles, a map token, a chest, 2 potions, or a key, and those are going to be at different spots and different levels. So whatever you want, you'd have to spend 0, 1, or 2 heat in order to gain those. You would take it, you'd move that to the bottom, and everything else would move up. So that is how the dive action works. You can also decide to place one of your flow markers on a shrine. So if you're on an iceberg that has one of these shrines, you're gonna be able to take the flow token that you have unlocked, so you've gotten it all the way up to the top of the resource track. You'd be able to take that and then place it onto one of these shrines. It would then allow you to perform another upgrade action, and then it would get you 1 victory point. So that is how you're going to be getting some victory points as well. Additionally, I've mentioned these map markers or map tokens. If you are able to ever get 4 map tokens and you're able to create a square with these 4 map tokens, that actually gets you an additional shrine space. Unfortunately, if you decide to place your flow token onto that shrine space, it is your shrine space only, so no other player can actually place theirs onto that spot, but there is no upgrade icon on those shrine spots with the 4 map markers, so you wouldn't be able to get the upgrade. But again, it just gives you more spaces to put those flow tokens. So that is another option. You can also decide to go to an encounter. So if there's ever a space that has an encounter, so it's a little flag, you get to go to that or pick up one of these encounter cards. So whether it is on an iceberg, you would pick up an iceberg encounter card. If it was in the sea, you'd be able to pick up a sea encounter card. Additionally, you can decide to discover a region. So these are the 4 that are undiscovered around the 2 that are already face up. If you are ever able to get a boat to one of the sea spots that are connected to one of these undiscovered regions, you would take a look at this little cloud marker here, and depending on which side is up, you would have to fulfill some sort of thing. So this one here is I could either spend 2 or have 2 red merits, or I could spend a map plus another map, and that would allow me to discover this region. I would flip it over, and additionally I would get a half a victory point. I believe possibly this has been changed to a full victory point. I could be wrong, but I believe I read that in the rule book. I would then spend whatever that is, whether that was having those merits, which you wouldn't spend the merits, you would just have those, and then I would spend the map tokens. I would then take this, I would flip it over to the discovered side, And then you would populate that section of the map by placing out the different tokens onto the icebergs as well as the sea spots. There are going to additionally be the landmarks. So whenever a landmark comes out, so like I mentioned here on this spot, you have a landmark, you're going to flip over the next landmark here. You're going to place whatever landmark needs to go there connected to the landmark card. So for example, this one would be the sunken shipwreck, which is actually not that one, it is this one. You'd place it here, and that is actually another action that you can take. So discovering a region is one, and then you also have going to a landmark. So this would be the action that you decide to do on your turn. Once you are finished moving, you would move to a spot with a landmark and you would decide to visit the landmark. So then when this happens, you would take one of your cubes that you took off of your heat track. So when you go to the noodle shop and you take one of the markers off of your heat track, you would take that cube and actually place it on the landmark card. And this is going to first get you, this one specifically here would get you one upgrade action. It would get you half a victory point, and then you'd also be able to do some sort of action right away, or there are going to be some landmark cards that allow you to do something. If you have your cube on there, you'll have this ongoing ability for the rest of the game. But both of the ones that are up right now are automatic things. So if I place this here, I'd be able to upgrade my hero or upgrade my dice. I would be able to get half a victory point, and then I would be able to dive and gain the X reward. So whenever you dive, there is one thing right at the bottom that is the X, so you can't go to that one until it does move up. But with this situation, you would be able to take the X reward. So that is the landmark, and then I believe the only other hero action that you'll be able to take when you are exploring. So after you have moved, you've paid your heat, you can also decide if you land on an iceberg that has a cave marker. This is going to allow you to dive into the cave or delve into the cave, because that's different than diving. You have diving, and then you have delving into the cave. So there are going to be, like I mentioned, 5 different monsters in the cave. You are all going to start at the far left, and each player is going to be able to move through this cave, going deeper and deeper, fighting these monsters and hopefully defeating them. And then once you do get to a certain point, there is the third cave where there is a cave event card that gets flipped over. Whoever gets there first gets to do some sort of cave event. And then it's going to give this other action that if someone goes all the way to the end of the cave, there's going to be some really strong action that's going to get you some victory points for a specific thing, but only one person is able to get that. Whoever gets there first is going to be able to do that cave action. So basically what's going to happen is each player is going to, whenever they decide to delve into the cave, again, this is something that you can decide not to do at all through the game. When I've played this, there has been some people that just decided not to do any cave actions, and you know, they did fine. But basically you're going to move into a chamber with a monster. The monsters are going to kind of progressively get more difficult. So there are the like greenish teal colored monsters that are the easiest. Then you move into the blue ones like the royal blue, and then there are pink monsters. So you move into that spot, you flip over a monster, and that monster card is going to have a few things on it. The first thing is at the bottom, it's going to have some sort of special ability for that monster. So it might be that the arrow dice have no effect. It might be that, you know, your familiar can't help you when it comes to defeating this monster, different things like that. There's also going to be the monster's health. So it's going to be, you know, 4, 2, you know, it depends on the monster. It also is going to have the monster's attack. So whenever the monster strikes back at you, how many heat you're going to lose whenever the monster hits you. Then there's also going to be some sort of reward if you are able to defeat the monster. So whenever you go into fighting a monster, you're going to first look at how many battle dice or how many dice you get to use. This is depending on how many upgrades you've done of the dice on your board. So you start out with 2, but depending on how many times you've upgraded it, you get more. You can also use potions to gain more dice. You can use potions to gain more of the different icons on the dice, but these are the dice here. They are these blue dice, and there are going to be 6 different things that you can roll on these dice. So you're going to simply roll all the dice that you have for the battle, and then you're going to count up how many of different icons you have. The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to count up how many arrows you have, because you are always able to hit the monster with as many arrows as you rolled, and the arrows are going to hit 1 damage to the monster. Each arrow is going to hit 1 damage. So for example, if the monster had 4 health and you rolled 2 arrows, you would simply deal 2 damage to the monster. If the monster was not dead at that point, the monster actually gets to hit you back. So however many hit points the monster has. In this example, the monster only has 1, so the monster would hit you. You would lose your 1 heat, and then you would be able to fight again with swords. So once you have gotten hit by the monster, you would then count up how many swords. Each sword is going to be 2. So for example, if the monster now only had 2 left and you did roll 1 sword, you would be able to deal those 2 remaining hits to the monster and the monster would die. So then you would get the reward that is on that monster, but there are a few other things on here. So the first thing actually is connected to the monster hitting you. If you rolled any of the sneak icon, that would allow you to kind of have a shield. So however many sneak you have, each sneak die face is going to protect you for 2 hits. So if you did roll a sneak in this situation and the monster had a 1, they would just not hit you. You wouldn't lose any heat. There is also the lantern. So if you rolled any lanterns and you did beat the monster, you would be able to gain one of the loot tokens that are connected to that chamber. There is also the magic icon, which allows you to perform different magic spells from your spell book. So there is this little battle card here. It gives you all the steps to the battle, but then on the other side there is your spell book. So you're allowed to spend 1 magic icon in order to put up your heat by 1. You can spend 1 magic icon to kind of switch different faces or flip the die to its opposite side. So if you rolled an arrow, you could spend a magic to turn it to a sword. If you rolled a sneak, you could turn it to a lantern, or the opposite way, you could turn the lantern into a sneak with 1 magic. You can also spend 2 magic to change any die into any face you want, and then you can also spend 5 magic if you happen to roll 5 magic to just full on defeat the monsters. So those are the magic icons. And then lastly, there is the critical hit icon. So if you roll this and you also rolled any arrows or any swords, this would add 1 additional damage to all of your arrows and all of your swords. So all of your arrows would then be worth 2 hits and all of your swords would then be worth 3 hits. So those are the different die here. There's also a monster die, which you are going to be rolling at certain points to give the monster more strength. So that's going to be for, I believe, the stronger monsters get those. But yes, that is everything for the defeating the monsters. Like I said, if you do defeat the monster, that monster gets taken out of that cave. A new monster gets placed in that cave for any other players that are going to be moving into that cave. You are also going to gain the reward on the monster card. You would also gain the reward beside the card. So a lot of the times this is going to be one of the secret goal cards. You will also then move through to the next cave, and when you do that, you gain a crystal. So you do gain quite a bit of benefits while doing this. Some of the other caves farther down the line do give you half victory points for defeating them. And then also, like I said, once you do get to the end of the cave, there is this little cave part that has 4 different rewards. One of them is going to be the reward on the event card that's going to get you quite a bit of victory points. And the other 3 are either a secret goal card, you can bump up one of your flow markers, or you can get a hero upgrade. So it's kind of a first come, first serve to those spots. But yes, that is everything for the defeating monsters. That is everything for the exploring in the Iceberg Sea, and that is everything for the village. I did also want to mention with the familiar, like I said, with the village, the familiar will then be activating the buildings. The familiar can then, when you're exploring in the Iceberg Sea, whenever you go to somewhere, you can decide to place your familiar in an adjacent sea spot. So for example, actually let me grab my little green familiar over here. So this character right here, if I placed them, let's say on this iceberg here, and I took this wood token, I would then be able to place my familiar in an adjacent shallow part of the sea, so like the lighter blue color, and that would gain me one of the bubbles. So most of the time it's the familiar is going to gain you a bubble, which if you decide to place your familiar, this does cost you 1 heat in order to do that. But most of the time it'll get you a bubble. A few of the spaces will get you some different things, as well as like a dive action possibly. But you do have to spend 1 heat in order to place your familiar there. And then additionally, you do also, if you want your familiar to help you in a battle, each of the familiars are going to help you in a different way, but it's just either, you know, adding a sword icon, adding an arrow icon, adding a sneak icon, anything like that. You do have to, again, spend a heat in order to do this, but you would place your familiar on their little tile, and then that would get you an additional thing when you're battling the monsters. All right, friends, so that is going to be everything for this preview of FLOE. Like I said, there's a lot going on and a lot to explain, so hopefully you guys are still following along. Hopefully this video is not too crazy long, and hopefully this kind of gave you an overview of the game and gave you a better feeling if this is something that is for you or not. So yeah, definitely go and check out the campaign. I will have the link to the campaign down below in the description box. So if it is something that you think you're interested in, definitely go and check that out. But yeah, huge thank you again to Pika Games for sponsoring today's video. I appreciate it. If you guys did enjoy, please give this video a big thumbs up. Also hit the subscribe button down below if you've yet to do so. We'd love to have you here in the garden. I love you guys so, so much. Remember, you are somebody's reason to smile, and I will see you in the next board game video. Bye, friends.